Hello, my name is Robert Davidian. I'm an American Armenian, and I am, like many Armenian Americans, I do not speak Armenian and do not read Armenian. So it's really hard to keep up with what's going on in Armenia. And that's why we have these kind of continuing conversations with Koko Yegnukian, who also lives in New York and is an Armenian from Yerevan originally, and he now travels back and forth and is very knowledgeable about what's going on and speaks and reads in Armenian also. Hi, Coco.
How you doing, Robert? Thanks for doing this.
All right. All right, great. Well, let's just talk about what's currently going on, and maybe you can help people understand. We hear about a border crossing, the Bedzor, and what is the Bedzor corridor and why is it closed?
Ever since the ceasefire, quote unquote ceasefire of November 9th, 2020, Artsakh,
From the war between Artsakh or between Armenia and Azerbaijan.
Azerbaijan. Yeah, so Artsakh became landlocked, and they didn't have a connection to Mother Armenia. The Berdzor corridor, also known as the Goris Stepanakert Highway, was the only connection because, as we know, otherwise it's completely surrounded by Azerbaijan. And on December 12th, so-called Azerbaijani environmentalists blocked the road, stating that Armenians are violating mining rights. It was an absolute joke because it was quite clear that they weren't activists. There's the famous scene of one of the environmentalist activists holding a dove during her speech, and they were going to symbolically let it free to show peace. And she was holding it so tight, when she released it, the dove just fell to the ground. She had actually choked the dove to death, the environmentalist. I think some of our viewers may have seen it. But more importantly, besides the Azerbaijani environmentalists, it is the Russian peacekeepers. There's many photos. There was one that was released a few days ago that shows the Russian peacekeepers with barbed wire, standing in rows of 2 or 3, I believe, blocking the road from Armenians going in and out. Even if that wasn't publicized, the entire purpose of the Russian peacekeepers, and I use the term peacekeepers in quotes, to be there was to assure safety of the Armenians, whether they were going in and out. And I mean, theoretically, the safety for the Azerbaijanis, even though they needed no such safety since they're the aggressor. So the Russian peacekeepers are not doing their job. Today, it's already December 27th in Armenia, so it's the 16th day of this blockade, and it's beyond a humanitarian crisis. It's the start of a genocide. We have 120,000 compatriots still living in Artsakh, and everything from the very basic necessities of hygiene to food and so forth cannot get in. Azerbaijan is saying, become Azerbaijani citizens and we'll grant you that. They're trying many different things to tear Artsakh away from Armenia and make it a part of Azerbaijan, or part of Russia, and eventually Armenia itself. This is why we saw the likes of Ruben Vartanyan supposedly give up his Russian citizenship and made this very emotional speech of how he's returning. And all he's doing is playing to the tune of Putin's fiddle. So that's the summary of what's going on.
What? First of all, this blockade is causing genocide, and you said that, but let's talk about really what's happening. There are many people that are in dire need of medical care that can't get through to Armenia to get the correct care. There's food and other staples that are needed to survive in Artsakh that cannot get through from Armenia. The shelves I saw are almost bare at the supermarket. People are running out of energy. So what else can you say about how the Artsakh people are feeling it?
It's a blockade in every sense of the word. As I said, everything from the basic for food and water to hygiene products to medication, nothing is getting through. They're blocked. It's whatever they had in their storage that's being used up, and obviously 15, you know, when you're used to deliveries on a daily or weekly basis, 16 days is way beyond that. And the peacekeepers are not doing anything. That is why the only solution at this point is to get rid of the Russian peacekeepers and bring in international peacekeepers with a mandate, whether they be the UN Blue Helmets or Scandinavian forces or European or American, somebody who is actually there to keep the peace. The Russians are there as occupants. The Russian forces are there to make the Azeris look like the henchmen and point fingers at them and say, "Oh, the Russians are doing whatever they can." There's even words going around that because the Russians don't have an international mandate, that they are limited in their capacity, which is just simply false. They are not limited. They are there to maintain the peace. They're not doing it, but they want to whitewash what the Russians are doing. The bad news is that the ones that should be asking for the international peacekeepers is our government. And by our government, I mean Pashinyan's regime, and by proxy, Arai Karutunyan, the so-called president of Artsakh, a republic that no one recognizes, including Armenia. As far as I'm concerned, and many Armenians are concerned, Artsakh is a province of Armenia. It is not a separate state. It is not a separate nation. I believe we spoke about this last time. Artsakh residents have an Armenian passport. When they travel abroad, they travel with that Armenian passport. So every time they pass a customs checkpoint and they present that Armenian passport, that means that when they're going to the US or France or Russia or wherever they're going, that custom agent recognized them as a citizen of Armenia. In any case, so the word that they're going around is that the Russians need a mandate. The other ideas that they're spreading is that we need to become strong and self-sufficient and get a stronger army so we can get rid of Azerbaijan once and for all. So these are just tactics used to stay away from the one true demand of getting international peacekeepers. Of course we should get strong. Of course we should build up a military and an economy and so on. But the beginning steps for that is to at least prevent this humanitarian crisis. No one says, how do we get strong? It's already 16 days. We're not going to get strong in the next 3 or 4 days and prevent this. So we need international peacekeepers. And Pashinyan's regime is not applying to the international peace, those that can give a mandate, whether that be the UN Security Council or elsewhere. We heard the meeting that was done at the UN Security Council. The Armenian representative might as well have been a Turkish representative. He didn't, what he had to do in very clear and uncertain terms, it's say, Mr. Secretary General, Mr. Secretary, the President of the Forum, we want UN peacekeepers there. The Russian peacekeepers, he didn't have to word to use occupants if he wanted to be diplomatic, are not doing their job. Our people are in danger. Get them there. Instead, he went into a roundabout story, how things are horrible and this and that, but didn't do that. The Russian delegation representative actually said that there was no problem. The only two out of all the countries that spoke The only two that didn't seem to think that there was a problem was the Azerbaijani representative and the Russian representative. All others, to some degree or another, very clearly stated that there is a humanitarian issue when there is a roadblock. The most vociferous of those were probably the Indian representative, the French, and of course, thankfully, the US representative that said that we call on Azerbaijan to lift the blockade. It's quite simple. Any place, whether it's Syria or Ethiopia, any place where you have a humanitarian crisis, you need international peacekeepers that do not have a stake in the game. They have to be completely objective. Russia is not objective by any means. We see what Russia is. Russia has gone beyond being a terrorist state. Russia is already the dictionary definition of terrorism. How can a nation that is waging war against a sovereign nation be a peacekeeper just a few countries down the road? It's absurd.
Yet there are still many Armenians in Armenia and in the US and all over that still sort of believe that give this government, give the Armenian government a chance to continue. And even Ruben Vartanian, who we just talked about, who is sort of the de facto prime minister of Artsakh right now, let him do whatever he wants to do. But can you explain? Is this a propaganda war as much as a blockade?
It's a whitewashing propaganda war. There's so many words, and it's funny when you say let him do the work. When Pashinyan first came into power, and people were demanding that, say, you have to revive the judicial system, you have to do this, and the Pashinyan supporters, their response was "Torek ashchaten," which literally means let them work. So we waited a few months, we waited a year. It is now almost 5 years later. And just yesterday, the Mishik, famous Mishik, which is Serd Sarkisyan's son-in-law, his brother was named justice minister.
Okay, Serd Sarkisyan was the
person that Pashinyan supposedly overthrew.
Yeah, he overthrew him because of all the illegalities that he partook in.
Illegality, corruption, yeah, everything.
Election fraud, and just abusing the people and stealing billions. But he's still free.
Well, not only is he free, they're all working together. Everybody this is what we need to realize as a nation, as a people, that everybody from Levon through Pashinyan, obviously including Serge and Robert Kocharyan, the second and third president, are all working for the Kremlin. Pashinyan came not to overthrow Serd Sarkisyan. Pashinyan came to legitimize what Serd Sarkisyan wanted to do. And it is now quite apparent. So forget about them being in jail. They're holding government positions. The very people that were responsible of the looting and the crimes and the murders and the destruction of our military that was so weakened and spread out. Now these people are he's becoming a justice minister. I think people are realizing it. They're afraid to speak out. We have, as a people, become so demoralized after the horrific autumn of 2020. I think there's very few Armenians that are still believing that Russia is in any way a savior. But the Kremlin is so good at propaganda. They work on many different fronts. That's why they throw Ruben Vartanyans, they throw Serd Sarkisyans, they throw Tigran Khazmalyans and people that pretend to be Western-minded, the Arman Babajanyans. I know I'm saying some names that may not be familiar, but to some there are. So there's all these little political factions that Some of them are pretending to be Western-minded. Some of them are saying wonderful things that we love to hear. They say, our only strength is in our unity. We must get together. We cannot depend on anybody. We must become strong. Sure, that sounds nice, but then they don't say how, especially when you're under a blockade for 16 days. Of course, we must become strong. But every nation, even as great as the US is, the US didn't become strong without the help of Europe at that time. I'm talking about at the time of the revolution. No one just single-handedly becomes strong, let alone in this day and age. And this is the magic thing. This is where I call on our viewers to realize this. Yes, it is a wonderful idea, but until that time, and we can become strong very quickly. It could be a matter of months, it could be a matter of years. But until then, we need international, objective peacekeepers that are there to do just that. Not Russian terrorist occupying forces that are facilitating and actually encumbering Armenians from traveling freely abroad, thus causing the humanitarian crisis that we see.
How do we get there? Because you're saying the Pashinyan government is just not going to do it.
Well, that's the problem. This is also the same problem of we spoke, I believe, last time about Wilsonian Armenia, our one and true only title of Armenia. And people say, well, if the Wilsonian Armenia is such a great thing, then why are there three agreements in the UN saying that it's Azerbaijani territory? And the example I give is if you don't complain about what's yours, if I come into your home and I take over your bedroom and your kitchen and your living room, and you say, you know what, I'll make do with my bathroom and my walk-in closet. If you don't complain, why should anybody else complain? You have to say, hey, this guy came here and he took my property. And you say, this is the lease that I have. This is the title to my home. You go to court and prove what's yours. We've never done that. We've never proven what's ours. So who else do we expect to speak on our behalf? Also, another important thing, the Russophiles like to say, well, where is the West? How come they're not helping? Where was the West during the 2020 war? Where was the West during the 4-day war in 2016? The West can do so much if you are an ally of the enemy. We are officially an ally of Russia. And at this point, Russia is not only an enemy of the US, it is the enemy of the world, save, I don't know, North Korea, Syria, and Venezuela.
Belarus.
Yeah, Belarus, yeah. So, so no one questions that. We've made it very clear that until we break off ties with Russia, especially now, until we break off ties with Russia, get out of the CSTO, and start forming alliances with Western nations, and not only Western nations, even Greece, Scandinavia, and so forth, we cannot have a future. We cannot expect them to do more than they already have.
What are the chances that the Pashinyan government would do that?
Pashinyan government will not do that unless their hand is forced. And the only way their hand will be forced for the time being is for the masses to come up. There needs to be a revolution, just like there was in 2018. The 2018, there was a revolution. Unfortunately, it didn't come to its conclusion. It got sidestepped by Pashinyan, who took control of the situation. The people came out genuinely to get rid of Serge Sarkisyan. Pashinyan came in as a savior, and he sidelined the people. So we need another revolution like that. And I truly believe that this time the people won't be fooled. It's just a matter of the people coming out. The people are, as I mentioned, demoralized. Some of them are afraid. Now it's the winter months, so it's even more difficult to come out into the street. But that is the only way for something to happen, to people to come into the street and force the hand of the regime. This is nothing new. I'm not saying any earth-shattering news. The only way that anything is done is when people come out in the streets.
Yes.
Whether it's a civil rights movement or women's suffrage or an 8-hour workday, everything in history has happened because people have come out into the streets for change and then for the regime to succumb to those demands.
And the change, the major change that we're looking for, or that you say can make a difference, is to cut off ties with Russia, as far as calling them peacekeepers and as far as belonging to the CSTO, that acts like a NATO kind of alliance, but it really doesn't work for Armenia. Proven just a few months ago when Azerbaijan actually attacked Armenia, and this alliance did not defend Armenia, unlike a NATO, for example, that would immediately defend any country that's attacked immediately. And so what political force in Armenia might agree to this direction?
There's only one. There are individuals, fortunately, scattered throughout, whether the diaspora or in Armenia. There are individuals who realize it. But as far as a organized political force that is doing something about it, it's the National Democratic Alliance that has been asking for international peacekeepers, that has been asking for the Pashinyan government to ask the U.S. government for the major non-NATO ally status, because obviously we can't be a NATO member. We're far from it, but we can. But there is such a status as being called a major non-NATO ally. It was created in the 80s, I believe, during the Reagan administration, and has been granted to many countries throughout the world, from Taiwan to Singapore to Israel, and you receive most of the benefits of being an actual NATO member without being a NATO member. They haven't done this. If we all remember, not that long ago, less than three and a half months ago, as you mentioned, in the September 13th, when Azerbaijan attacked not only Artsakh, which according to them is not Armenia, which it is, they actually invaded the current Armenia, and the CSTO still did nothing. And then, of course, we remember Pelosi visiting, and Pelosi and Jackie Spears saying, you must leave the CSTO, and they didn't mince their words. They said, in order for us to help you. And then they all spoke about it, and all these pseudo Western-minded politicians came out, said, yes, it's time, yet nothing happened. That decision can be done in minutes. Some people
that decision can be forced. That decision can be forced by people at least becoming more aware, and then maybe protesting and standing in the street.
What I meant was the actual decision to cease membership.
Oh yeah.
It's not a long, drawn-out member. Some people think it's a drawn-out thing. It's not. No. If it was a whimsical decision to leave the CSTO, yeah, I believe there's a waiting period. But when the CSTO has not fulfilled its obligations, which is to protect the member state, it can be done instantly. So there is no reason between September 13th and now that it hasn't been done. There was a CSTO meeting in Armenia a couple of weeks ago. They signed some random papers, but again, a decision was not made. Pashinyan came out furious, and the papers wrote that he gave Putin a big smack, saying that he was disappointed with Syria. Don't be disappointed, leave.
Yeah, and he didn't. And
he didn't.
We're talking about Nicole Pashinyan, the Prime Minister of Armenia, has not left the CSTO, and he also is still aligned with Putin. Now, why isn't he leaving? That's the big question.
He's Putin's guy. He's Putin's guy. It's not a big mystery. It's not a big mystery. If you're in an abusive relationship, which is what this is, so Russia is their ally, but they're abusing you. If we bring it down to more of a familial context, if you're in an abusive relationship, a spousal relationship, or any other kind of partnership, you don't just condemn the other partner for being upset. you leave the situation. And of course, if you're powerful enough, you retaliate, whether that's through physical force or through a judicial system. Pashinyan has done nothing but complain. And Armenians being an emotional people, we say, oh, you see what Pashinyan did? He spoke so bluntly against them. But to no avail. By the way, he didn't even speak that bluntly. If anything, Putin and Lukashenko at that meeting spoke to him like he was a kid.
Mm-hmm. So what can the people do? Well, at least we can say that people can become a little more aware of the National Democratic Alliance and follow them and maybe become involved.
Become involved, and my big message would be to steer clear of I don't know what to call them, the false prophets, the ones promising and giving these wonderful speeches and rhetoric about us being on our own and independent, that no one cares about us except for ourselves, and so on and so forth. We're not saying that they care about us. It's no big secret that every nation on earth does what is in their interests.
You know what? I just want to say that I also became involved, and part of it is because that you organized great protests in front of the United Nations, in front of Times Square. Coco's in New York, everyone, and if you're anywhere near New York, try to get involved and see when the next protest is. Hey, look, a protest makes a big difference. It gets noticed, and and Coco's getting a lot of press coverage for Armenia, for our people in Artsakh, and it will make a difference if you step out and stand there and make demands that are in line with the people helping the people of Armenia.
Absolutely, yeah. It's little droplets, just on speaking of protests, just this Wednesday we were out in Times Square again, demanding international peacekeepers, and we formed alliances with. I mean, as you know, Times Square is not only the center of New York City. I would say the center of the U.S., maybe the center of the universe, as far as diversity comes. And we were fortunate enough that we had representatives from several nations joining us and making that demand for the Russian occupants to leave and the request for international peacekeepers to come in. I think it was the first time in quite a long time that it wasn't just Armenians saying it. We had representative from a Taiwanese community, the Ukrainian community, Mongolian community, Kazakhstan community, I don't remember all of them, as far as several others. And I think that was a very important thing, that because often we say, oh, no one cares about Armenia, our voice isn't heard, but we have to get out there. We have to, just like I and my friends over here have made an effort to connect with these people that are also subjects of Russia or China, and they all have their own issues, and we support them, and they in kind support us, and that word becomes stronger. But yes, the people must do everything we can, stay focused. Very few things in life are gray. Most things, I believe, are quite clearly black and white. They might have nuances, but they're black and white. We need international peacekeepers. We have to get that message through. International objective peacekeepers. Russian occupants must be out of there. This is at this point not because we don't like them or whatever. It is for the survival of the 120,000 Armenian compatriots that we have over there.
Okay, thank you. Where can people sort of follow along the National Democratic Alliance? On Facebook?
Facebook, they do have a website. Their website is AJBEVER, BEVER.com, I believe. There's also the National Democratic Alliance, both in English letters and Armenian letters. In Armenian, it's Ազգային-Ժողովրդավարական Բևեռին. They can also follow my page. I have quite a bit.
So wait, you were saying there's the English letters in the Facebook page?
There's a Facebook page called National Democratic Alliance in English letters, which is a direct translation of Ազգային-Ժողովրդավարական Բևեռին, and then the AJ BEVER in English letters.com, the website. And many of the board members are maybe familiar names. Ara Papian was a former ambassador to Canada, and who's also done research for, at this point, 20 years of Wilsonian Armenia and our inherent rights to it. As a Garegin Chukazisyan, foremost IT specialist, Jirai Sefilian, a hero of the first Artsakh War, one of the liberators of Shushi, among other places, and several others. One of the board members actually is in prison with health concerns, Varujan Avedisyan, which is another issue that we were also holding protests and sit-ins. Unfortunately, that got sidelined because of the Berzor corridor. Because we have, as a nation, we have so many catastrophes going on simultaneously. It's like putting, you have a bucket of water and we're trying to put out 6, 7 different 5-alarm fires with the bucket of water. So our resources are limited. But that is the main thing, to get away from the Russian occupants. 4 or 5 years ago, even 1 year ago, people may have not realized it. But ever since the war in Ukraine, I think there's very few adequate thinking people that still believe that there's any hope in Russia. Russians don't believe it. Russians are fleeing by the thousands to everywhere.
I just want to say there are probably people that are wondering, well, how can I make a difference, or how can I help? Yes, if you're not in New York, okay, it doesn't matter where you are. If you go to those pages, especially Los Angeles or any large city, you'll be able to find support and also stand up in the streets to show the strength of the Armenian people all over the country, all over the world. So don't hesitate to take a look at those pages.
Before we go, Robert, I'm sorry to interrupt. You just reminded me, they haven't fully publicized it yet, but January 9th, there will be a protest in LA demanding the exit of the Russian occupants and asking for international peacekeepers. I don't know the time and place yet. If I'm not mistaken, they usually meet at the consulate in Glendale. Yes. But we'll keep them posted. But for now, it's January 9th is a set date. It's a little bit in the future, but obviously because of Christmas and New Year's and Armenian Christmas, once again, resources were limited.
Just before we sign off, can you just say the websites again for the people watching?
ajbever.com. So it's ajbever.com. National Democratic Alliance, as far as a Facebook page, yes.
Okay, great. All right, thanks a lot, Coco, and really good information, and let's keep it flowing.
Okay, thank you, Robert, for doing this, and we can tell our viewers that we'll try to do this on as much on a regular basis as we can.
Bye-bye.
Good evening.